My dear students of BA Part 1, first of all, a very warm morning to all of you. Dear students, in this Corona period, you know our online classes are on and we are trying to guide you people through e-contents like PDF or through videos. In my previous video, I have discussed stanza number 12 from the Scholar Gypsy for you people, and in that stanza we had seen that the scholar is being searched by the poet, and in that search he is taking the help of the shepherds. He means the poet searches him here and there or to the particular areas where the poet was told, the poet was informed by the villagers or by the shepherds about the visit of the scholar. The scholar is placid minded. He is a cool minded person. He is friendly to all. He has befriended one and all rather. Even one of the agile birds like blackbirds doesn't panic him, is not afraid him at all. He knows that the scholar is not going to harm him. So while the scholar is passing by, the blackbird keeps on eating his food because he knows the friendly nature, the friendly attitude of the scholar. Now I have a good mind to discuss stanza number 15 for you people, as this stanza is very important for the explanation or from the view of explanation. This stanza holds much water. But before coming to this stanza, I must give you some idea regarding the stanza number 14, and then it will be easy for you people to grasp, to understand stanza number 15. As you know, dear students or dear friends, that Matthew Arnold has taken this story from Glanvill's Vanity of Dogmatizing, and the poet says that 200 years have passed since Glanville has penned down the story of the scholar who was undoubtedly a promising student, a practical student, a pragmatic student, but he has to son, he has to leave his studies because of his poverty. He was not in a position to carry on his studies, and it's why he leaves his university, that is Oxford, and joins the band or group of gypsies to learn their art of living. And 200 years have passed. But naturally, the poet believes that he might have died. He must be lying somewhere in one of the graves in the churchyard, where there must be some grasses might have grown up. He says he must have died, departed from the earth long since. No doubt the poet is searching the scholar. At the same time, the idea hits his mind that the scholar might have departed. He must have left this world for his heavenly abode. He must be resting somewhere in some country nook or corner, unknown, in one of the graves, where tall grasses and white flowering metals must have grown under a dark red fruited yew tree's shade. So he might have died. He must have died rather. He must have left this world. 200 years have passed. And then in stanza number 15, see what a change in the thinking of the poet. How he changes the gear. See the lines first. No. Repetition of the word no. I have told you time and again that if in a sentence, in a particular sentence, a particular word is repeated more than once, there is repetition, which is one of the literary terms or one of the figures of speech. No, thou hast not felt the lapse of hours. Lapse of hours, flow of hours. Thou means you. Thou stands here for the scholar. In the previous stanza, the poet is of this view that the scholar must have departed the earth. He must have left this world. He must be lying somewhere in some grave among the long grasses and tall trees. But here in this stanza number 15, he changes his opinion regarding the departure, regarding the death, regarding the demise, regarding the death, regarding the departure, regarding the demise of the scholar, telling, no, it's not possible. You must not have died. You must be living somewhere, because your youth is perennial. You are not under the hold of time. You are not under the compass of time. You are not under the clutch of time. Time can't harm you. Time can't bring any change into your perennial youth. Therefore he says, no, thou hast not felt the lapse of hours. For what wears out the life of mortal men? The poet is here comparing between the life or between the lifestyle of the men living upon this earth and the lifestyle of the scholar. There is a great difference between these two lifestyles. Time weakens we people. Time weakens the people who are mortal. Time weakens the persons who are under its hold. Time weakens the person who are under the compass of time. It is because of time we, from our childhood, travel to our old age, and it is because of time one day we pass away. One day we leave this world for the heavenly abode. So we are directly under the control of time. Time controls us. Time eats up our youth. Time weakens us. We feel the lapse of time. But this is not the case with the scholar. A scholar is beyond the hold, beyond the clutch of time. For what wears out? Time wears out. Time exhausts. Time weakens. For what wears out the life of mortal men? It is that from change to change, repetition of the word change, it is that from change to change their being rolls. It is that repeated shocks again, once again, repetition of again, exhaust the energy of the strongest souls and numb the elastic powers. The poet believes that the scholar is imperishable, जिसका नाश नहीं हो, जो कभी खत्म नहीं हो. The scholar is eternal. He is immortal. His youth is imperishable. The scholar gypsy must be imperishable. He can't die. He can't die like the common people, like the common man. Why? What for? Why should he not die like the common man, like the common person, like the common people? What is special in him that differentiates him from the common lot, from the common people, from the common man? That he is imperishable, that he can't die, that he is immortal. He is also a human being. Of course, he is a human being, but he can't share the fate of common man because he has not lived his life the way common man lives. This is the basic difference, and it's a great difference. Since he has not lived like us, why should he die like us? So the scholar is imperishable, he must be imperishable. He has not felt the lapse of hours which affect the life of common man. The poet turns from the death of the scholar to the thought that he is not really dead, as I have told you. In stanza number 14, the poet believes, or an idea hits in his mind that the scholar might have departed this world. He must have died. He must be lying somewhere in some grave among the tall trees and long grasses. But in stanza number 15, he changes the gear. His thinking takes a U-turn from death and demise, from the world of mortality. He switches over, the poet switches over to the world of immortality. From the world of death and demise, he switches over to the world of life. And life that is perennial life, that is eternal life. The scholar, being an exceptional character, living an exceptional life, is exempt. Means the rule of life and death does not apply to the scholar, does not apply upon the scholar. He is exempted. He is exempted. से बचा हुआ होना. He is exempted from the common lot of men. Means the rules and regulations of life and death, of the lapse of hours, by which a man from his childhood age comes to his youth, and his youth after some time changes into the old age. He gets weak, he loses his strength, his power, and ultimately he dies, he passes away. We common persons, we common people, we common men are under this law. This law is applied to all of us. But the same law which is applied to all of us is not applied to the scholar, because he has not left the life as we live. In the life of common people, there are so many changes and frustrations. See the line, it is repeated shocks. The scholar has one aim, one business, and one goal. He has left his studies, he has left his university, and he has a single mission. Only one task in life, that he has to learn the intricate art of the living style of the scholar, of the gypsies. So in the life of common people, there are too many changes and frustrations, shocks and repeated shocks again and again, which exhausts the energy of strongest souls and numb their elastic powers. See the lines. What weakens common man? I am repeating it again and again. I am trying to make you people understand what is the difference between the scholar gypsy, his lifestyle, and we people, we common men, and our lifestyles. It's quite clear here. It is that repeated shocks, jhatka, shocks, repeated again and again. Before that, there is one more line. It is that from change to change. Means we people go on changing our aims and goals time and again. We go on rolling. Take the case of a stone. If that stone keeps on rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling and rolling, what happens? It changes into sand. It is the friction, जिसको आप घर्षण कहते हैं, it is the friction that weakens, कमजोर करता है. ये घर्षण कमजोर करता है, फ्रिक्शन. We drive the bike. It is the friction, it is the rolling of some parts. It is the friction that destroys some of the parts of the bike. So we common people, we common men go on rolling and rolling and rolling. It's but natural that rolling is to weaken us. That rolling is going to affect us. It is going to exhaust us. It is going to eat into our vitals. And this is not the case with the scholar gypsy. Because he has one aim, one desire, and one goal. He is not rolling like us. It is that repeated shocks again and again. It means we common people, we common men might be under some circumstances go on changing our aims and goals and our desires. We go on changing. We go on rolling. We go on fluctuating. If voltage fluctuates, the bulb fuses. The bulb fuses. It happens with the life also, with the life bulb also. If we go on fluctuating in our aims and goals and desires, our life bulb gets fused and we die. This friction weakens us. It eats into our vitality. It exhausts us. No doubt. The line says here, exhaust the energy of the strongest souls. This is a alliteration of the S sound in strongest and souls. We are the strongest souls. But what weakens us? Our rolling weakens us. Our fluctuations in our aims and desires and goals weakens us. It destroys our elasticity. That repeated shocks again and again, which exhausts the energy of the strongest souls and numb their elastic powers. Nature has provided us elasticity. But that elasticity also breaks after certain point. It gets numb. And then what happens? That is to say that the frequent shocks and frustration of life in the case of the common man deprive them of their buoyancy, elasticity of temperament, and adaptability. We lose our power of adaptability. We lose the power of elasticity. Our life becomes dull and boring. We go on dragging our life. We become dead in our living. We fail to enjoy our life. We make our life a burden. We make our work a drudgery. We become slave to time. Time overpowers us. We make our life hellish. We fail to enjoy the pleasure of life. Life must be enjoyed. It must be lived in full vigor, with full enthusiasm. But our selfishness, our greed, our different wishes and desires. So, it's quite clear. The basic difference, the very difference between the life of the scholar gypsy and the life of we people is this, that the former's life is shockless and ours is a shocked life. It is because of the repeated shocks we lose our vitality, and ultimately we lose our youth. We become old, and a time comes when we have to pass away, and this is not the case with the scholar. So dear students, I have tried my level best to make you people understand this stanza, that is stanza number 15, and in my next class, in my next video, I will be explaining some more important stanza for you one by one. So I request you to go through the next stanza, that is stanza number 16 and stanza number 16 and stanza number 17 on your own, so that it might be easy for you people to understand understand the stanzas if you have prior reading. Thanks to all of you for today. We will meet again next time. Till then, have a very, very sweet and sumptuous days and night. God bless you.